Hey guys, today's tutorial is going to be for noses and different angles and how I paint them. I usually don't post to YouTube, but I thought I should just start doing that and then posting as much content as I can. And I think this is a great. Really, it's not to get popular. I'm really doing this. My main goal is to build some consistency because I feel like that I have all the tools, I have all the things necessary for me to do all of this, but I feel like I don't take it as seriously because I don't feel like I am serious, even though I want to. I don't know if that makes any sense, but the thing that kind of sucks though is that it's me. It's not even anybody else stopping me. It's just me. And I find that when I have consistency and a schedule, I tend to do a lot better. So, but yeah, I find it that when I'm drawing and I have a schedule, I do a lot better. So what I want to do is just show you guys my process and basically how I start out with a nose. Like, for example, I generally like to have like an underlining, and when I do that, it allows me to have a general sense of where everything's gonna go. Like, for example, sometimes I just move the nose a bit, adjust it, so that I have a better undersketch, and I go from there. Sometimes I just scrap the undersketch in general. I typically don't unless I messed up the proportions, which I kind of did, which that's I actually could have fixed that before then, but yeah, and then I just laid down a second one using a lighter layer, well, not lighter layer, a lighter strokes, and then on the second layer I do a darker. For this one, doing like a front facing, I usually just block in the major forms, and then just kind of get a general placement, and then I start going in with the occlusion, which is just like the darkest parts of the area, like the really dark parts where light just doesn't hardly touch at all, which would be like the folds between like the sides of the nostrils, and where it creates an indent, and then the indent between the corners of the front of the eyes that are closest to the bridge. I didn't have to reinforce that that side bridge of the nose, but I wanted to just to give it more of like a defined effect. And so for this one, I thought that I would just go with kind of a more difficult layer. I mean, not layer, but difficult position. I generally don't do this pose, so I thought I'd challenge myself a bit and then kind of give you guys a challenge and like a view of how this would go. And I realized later on that I don't paint it. I had some trouble with it. I don't paint it exactly. I didn't use reference, so I thought for this video I was going to do reference, but I thought I'd test out and see my abilities and how good I am. And then if it was just garbage, I would have just scrapped it. But I was like, you know what? Let me just teach from what I know. And then later on, after like 2 or 3 years, I'll probably be like, this is garbage, and then make a new video. But yeah, I just typically, like, if you're studying something or you're drawing or you're bored and you don't know what to do, I would just pick a topic, pick a subject. And I know if we want to just bust out paintings and just be awesome, it's gonna be hard to want to do that, to slow down and just kind of have a consistency. So if you guys have issues with that, like me, just pick out a topic like noses and just start drawing. And then don't even worry about like coloring in anything right then, because you have to have your foundation first. And that's an issue I had for the longest time. I just wanted beautiful paintings and colors and dancing with pen marks everywhere, but I didn't even really bother to take time to do the foundations. And once we do that, it just looks so beautiful and it's so worth it. And you just have to get yourself in that mindset. Just minimize your goal. Make it very small. Be like, okay, I'm going to do this, and that. Like maybe a couple poses. I would say 4 minimum if you're ever doing like one subject, like the nose. Because if you're just drawing one nose or 2 noses, it doesn't really set in with the practice. You know what I mean? It acts more as like a single illustration rather than actual practice. Like, so I would say 4 minimum. Honestly, I would even go for 5. But I just wanted to make this like a quick demo and not take too long. And also too, you can, one thing I generally do is sometimes I just do noses, but I like to add a little bit of the other parts of the face. I just think it makes it prettier, I guess. Or maybe I know the point of practicing is not for it to be pretty, but for accuracy and just getting it to be just like a reference would. But this in general, actually, I'm not doing from reference, so I used to get a little more leeway. And now here what I'm doing is I am I'm duplicating the layer, and then just kind of messing with the opacity of that second layer, and then I merge them. And sometimes I do Gaussian blur for the second copy, but for this I just didn't. I just wanted a more crisper. I wanted you guys to still see the lines. And here I kind of regret using this brush. It seems cool at first, but it's a pencil brush. It looks nice to like block in, but I wanted to have more control of my shaping of the nose. So like when I get to like the right side of the other nose, you'll see I had some trouble with that. So I ended up just switching to the regular round brush. But I had it on hand, so I thought what the heck, I'll just use it. But it's good for like if you're doing black and white to fill in the shadow. But I'm going straight to colors, so I probably should have used the round brush. Like I used the round brush to erase, but I'll find out later when I'm filling it in. I should have used, in shading, I should have used the regular round brush. So yeah, I'm pretty much just blocking in with this somewhat saturated, like orangey type of tan base color. It's more like a light burnt sienna. It's just a basic skin tone without any shadow or lighting or anything, of course, and it works. It's a color that works really well with a certain palette. I would generally use this as like if you're just drawing like a regular basic thing. Like if you're going for somebody who's like more of a not super light but not super dark either, I would go for this because this is just kind of like, I'm not saying standard skin tone. I mean more like it's one of the basics, I guess, because when you go out to more and more different types of people and skin tones, you'll find that everyone's very unique. So it's hard to memorize like every single one of those. So if you're going for like a medium tone person, I generally put a tan base like this, and then I would start out with not too dark of a shade, but it depends on how contrasty you want it to be. So I started out with like a somewhat darker shade. And I find out later on, yeah, this chalk-ish pencil brush doesn't work very well when I'm trying to do I mean, it works for some of the angles, but then some of the angles it doesn't because I need more detail. So it's good for blocking in shadow, but for refining, it's not very good. So as you can see, it took me a while to like try and blend it properly because I was trying to use this brush instead of using the other one, the hard round. Yeah, and these brushes I actually just purchased. Like they were so well worth it, but I need to use them for what they're meant. And they were these I forgot the name of it. I think it's called Mac something, but I'll leave them in the description. It is $4. It's really worth it though. I thought I don't know about this, so I bought it, and because another artist recommended them, and then I was like, heck yeah. It actually acts like a paper pencil, an actual pencil like would be on paper. Which is what would discourage me when I would draw in digital art, is that you can just erase so easily, and like there's nothing really like there's nothing saying, hey, you better be careful and do this correctly because you don't get to erase. You don't have that feeling with Photoshop, so I find that when I don't have that, it's harder for me to really be careful with my drawing. Like I just want to be so fast and get this brush stroke here and there, but when I find myself doing traditional, I do a lot better with my drawings because I'm forced to take my time. I'm forced to pay attention with every stroke. Every stroke counts. So it's very to have those tools available. And I would never ditch traditional. You know, that's I feel like that's just my foundations. And I started with that before I ever got to digital art back in 2013. But yeah, that's where my skills transferred was from traditional to digital. So I think when I find when I did do traditional painting, it really helps me get back into like the good gears of, well, a good, process. Because when I get into digital art, there's so many different ways you can do stuff, whereas traditionally very limited. But it doesn't mean that you're limited into to make beautiful paintings, just limited with your options. But as soon as digital painting came around, it just became an explosion of different people's types of things or ways to do stuff. So it can confuse a person. But when you're with limited stuff and minimal things, you really learn how to work on just one medium, and it really helps you. Because I used to be like all over the place. I was like, oh, ink or pen or pencil or this and that, and it just kind of threw me off. But yeah, and here I added some like basic reds and pinks and it was kind of like a reddish pink color, and I just added it to the lips and used that same one. I guess I was kind of lazy, but it's a quick way to do it. You can use, depending on the lip color, you can use the lip color as your blush, which I wouldn't recommend for all skin tones, but this worked for this specific example. Now you'll see here I really had to work with this one. I had some trouble, to be honest. I've not done a lot of nose studies, but just from looking at pictures, the depth, like really good pictures that have like really pretty lips or really defined lips or really defined noses, it just sits in my memory, like the sculpt of it, not necessarily the colors or the shadows, but like the really dark shadows and like what really defines it. It really just sticks in my brain, and a combination of studying. Because I honestly have not done a lot of nose studies, but I've done a lot of portraits, so in a way I am doing nose studies, but I kick myself sometimes because it's like, dang it, I should have did this or that, so that, when we do our next paintings, they're not this weird knob on the face. Man, my noses used to be so bad. Like, I didn't understand how a nose worked, and then once I started actually doing portraits and really actually looking at how the nose works and how it forms around the face and its form itself and the nostrils, and how it sits on the face, how the shadow affects it, and then some people having certain features on the nose, some people not. It really helped me. And honestly, what's nice about having studying from different races and different ethnicities and such is that certain features aren't exaggerated on others. So like, or certain features don't even exist, or certain indentations, some are not as indented, some are like the whole nose plus like the corners of the eyes are different for a lot of people and races. So that actually helps because you're not stuck drawing the same kind of nose. Each one will look a little different, but not too different. Each one will look like a regular standard nose, but like it'll have its uniqueness to it. Because a nose has a basic shape, If you strip away the skin and the muscles and everything, you just have those two little holes and slits, and then you have the bridge. So it's really, and then the indents, like where the corners of the eyes are. So it's really defined on that, and then depending on how the cartilage wants to grow on the nose. So, but yeah, once you get that like inventory in your head, you just feel like you can keep reworking the nose, and then your backup memory just starts to kick in, and you start to think, well, I could add it like this or like that. Like if you don't like drawing a certain nose a certain way, you could be like, oh, well, I can draw it like this since I remember. And if I hadn't had different memories of drawing different portraits, I probably would not be able to rework that nose. It took me a while, but I had to really think about like different ways that I've shaded noses. Like all my memory of shading and doing different angles actually saved me from this. So yeah, which shows actually what I need to practice on, what angles. So I'll definitely when you're doing this kind of stuff, it's almost like a practice within a practice, because like if you're doing stuff like this without reference and you try to do certain poses or angles and you don't know, instead of just going and getting a bunch of references of all different kinds of angles and noses, that can be really daunting and really kind of stress you out. I mean, I know it does for me. So instead, just try and draw like take like 4, 5, 6 different angles, and I wouldn't do too many, but I would just say do them all. Shade them, everything, the best of your ability, and the ones that you really had trouble with or you just cannot figure out, separate those, make a new document, and then take those, and then you can just copy the line work, or you can either rework it or copy the line work. I probably would just start from scratch. so you can just really know what was wrong. And then like I would hide those layers and then take your reference photo of those poses that you're not good at and then just rework it. And that really helps in the mind because you're like, how do I do? You're like, oh, that's what I was missing. It's usually missing information or how the shape works that throws us off. Like this, I was kind of starting to get it. I was actually really happy. Like I forgot that I needed to put a certain shade because I forgot to look at it as a triangle when it was in 3D. Like it's easy when it's that same pose over and over, but... And then I actually really liked how it turned out because I started really working with it. And I really loved that pose too, so the upturn where you can see the top of the lip, under the top of the lip, it's very pretty and soft. And the nose, and then the bridge of the nose looks really pinky and nice, and it's really pretty. So, and that's part of the fun with practicing. I honestly don't know why I skipped the second nose. I think because I really wanted to get started on painting that one, I realized. And this, I realize I really do struggle with nose lighting. There's certain, I think because for the longest time, and it probably still stuck in there somewhere, that I wanted my nose lighting had to look the way that one of my favorite artists looked, and one shouldn't do that. It's all about just getting those colors and forms and value correct. And then having proportions. But yeah, I tried. I tried. But yeah, if you're confused on something, just use reference. And don't be afraid to use reference. Like, people are saying, oh, you know, you're not supposed to use reference. It's like, oh, well, how the heck did master painters get to become master painters? They didn't just look at something and be like, oh, I know how to draw that. They had to study over and over and over. That's why they're called master, because they mastered references. They mastered life. You can't master drawing life. Like, mastering is considered practicing, so they haven't completed it if they haven't really looked at life. You know, you can't master something if you don't know how it works. You know what I mean? Because they were master painters because they took the time to look at references and really analyze them. And you know, what's cool though is that don't let a crappy study, like, I'm not saying my study is necessarily crappy. There's some stuff I don't like about it, which is good because I can take that, and this goes into my point. You can take something you don't like in your study and then just find references and redo it, or just do it from scratch. You could touch up. I would say leave touching up for like finished pieces, like full bodies and everything. Yeah, I would really try and study a lot, as much as you can. Try to make every drawing you do studies. Do more studies and less final pieces. Until it gets to the point where like you're really confident in doing final pieces and that you don't really need to study much, and then make it where it's less studying and more final pieces. Depends on what you're comfortable with. Yeah, like, see, I had trouble with and I didn't think that I would have trouble with this, but I had trouble with the lighting, or the light speckle on the nose. And I really wanted to look up reference, but I was like, it's like I shouldn't. Now I can see what I needed to add, because I'm just like, I'm lost. But, yeah. So... And finally I get to this nose. I totally skipped over it. I don't even understand. But just do something where it looks like, even if it looks like garbage, just try and practice different angles and stuff. Because you got to get used to practicing without reference eventually. Because that's the point of getting references, so you can get it stuck in your head. So it cements in your memory. Because we use reference because of the lack of being able to do things from memory. I know for me, it was an issue trying to do the same thing over and over. Like starting a bunch of noses over and over and over and over again. But I just got over that somehow. I'm not exactly sure how. I think it's because I was trying so hard to get to this certain angle or a certain goal. Like, oh, they all have to be pretty. And it was like, no, I just focused on each section at a time. Instead of trying to make this pretty drawing, I was just worried about getting color, getting the color right, getting the lines right, getting proportions, all that stuff. And then it just comes together on its own when you work on each individual piece. So I hope this has helped you guys, and that you can take whatever you can from this. I know this is actually, after you're done listening, it sounds pretty short, so thank you for listening.